Hey guys! So, have you ever looked at a capybara and thought, "Aw, how cute"? Now, how can I mess it up? No? Just me then? Well, let's just see how much damage I can do. I think I may have said enough already, so let's get into it. I used quite a few materials this time, especially in the making of quite a few of the accessories, but the main yarn colours are shown on screen now. I will of course list all the other materials I used in the description box below. I started off by making the legs first. I did this off camera to save some time, and you've seen me do the legs pretty much like this plenty of times. But essentially, I crocheted the feet using the darker brown, followed by the light brown and then the teal for the shorts. I cleaned up the bottom of the shorts by surface crocheting along their bottom edge, and I repeated this for the other leg and then joined them together. After I was done with the shorts, I carried on up the torso until I reached the point where the arms needed to be inserted. Again, I crocheted the actual arms off camera, and I also inserted some armature wire wrapped in a small amount of quilt batting. I made the arms slightly larger than I would have because of Beppo. My partner did say that his arms were too thin. And I'm not making a Punkybara, so with the adjustments made, I attached the arms. Also, all that was then left of the main body was to finish off the head and install the eyes. With the head completed, it was time to move on to the finer details. To make the snout, I crocheted a rounded square-ish, and then also made some ears which were just small circles. I attached the snout by sewing it onto the face. I have to admit, at first I had the thought that it made him look more like a horse, but then I had to trust the process. Anyway, we can argue this in the comments later. Anyway, I continued on and added the embroidery for the nostril and mouth details, and then sewed on the ears close-ish to the eyes and in line with the top of the snout. With the head complete, it was time to move on to the glorious punkifying of this capybara. A Punkybara, if you will. At this point, I also added some details on the shorts, including a zip and some pockets. I made the pockets functional to make them look more like cargo shorts. For his hair, I wanted to go with a mohawk style because you can't have punk without a mohawk, and it also fit well with the neon colours I chose. I started off the base with a few rows of crochet in the initial colour, then went on to change every few stitches while I then continued crocheting the hair. I wanted a colour change from yellow to orange to pink and then finally the blue, and then added a green sort of stripe down the middle. With his hair done, I sewed it onto his head using the long tail I'd left earlier. The accessories of any project are by far my favourite part, so often it's those final touches that bring it all together. Besides which, I usually love creating all the different items, and in this case, I absolutely enjoyed making all the hardware for this guy. For the bracelet, I used some flat elastic and these studs that I bought a long time ago. I really can't remember where I got them from, but it was around 10 years ago. The studs just get pushed into the elastic, and then using some pliers, the little prongs on the end are bent down to keep the stud secured in place. I spaced the studs evenly along the band, and once I sewed the ends together, I used a final stud to hide that join. Next, I made chains for his waist using 2 different types for variation. It's not a belt though, it's just chains hanging from one belt hoop to another. I made the smaller chain longer than the other so that it would swoop down more. I then connected them together using some split rings and added a lobster clasp to the end to attach it onto the belt hoop. I made a few more simple chains for other body parts, but I did these off camera because they mainly just involved cutting a piece of chain to the correct length, like fitting the neck area for example. I did however use some split rings to give him eyebrow and nose piercings. With the accessories and hardware done, it was time to move on. All that was left was his jacket, and I opted to make a denim vest rather than a crocheted one, since I thought it would look better and I could properly punk it up. As it happens, I have a cloth marking pen that uses heat sensitive ink. The ink will vanish when you apply heat. This was great because if I made a mistake, I could erase it without having to start again. So using some calico fabric, I draped a vest onto my Punkybara. I then used the pen to mark out my lines before cutting and trimming it up. Once I had my finished shape, I then took a denim patch strip and used my iron to fuse it onto the fabric. I cut out the armholes and deliberately frayed the edges. This took a while actually, since I was just using an awl and other various pointed tools to carefully pick away at the ends of the fabric. There's probably a faster way to do this, but if there is, I don't know. Okay, so once I had actually finished this vest, I realized that I wanted to have a lighter shade of denim. So I repeated the steps I did before, including fraying the edges. I think this one looks much better. At this point, it was time to just doodle and do whatever popped into my mind as I drew some symbols on the vest, starting with the anarchy sign and going from there. So guys, while you watch me doodle away, and before we get to the reveal, I'd just like to say thank you for watching, and of course if you'd like to see more, please like, share, comment and even consider subscribing. If you are feeling generous, then also please consider buying me a cup of coffee on Ko-fi. The link to my Ko-fi page will be included in the description box below, and any and all donations will be greatly appreciated. Also, don't forget to hit that bell button to be notified whenever I upload a new video. Anyway, enjoy the beauty shots and remember to always do what you want like a Punkybara would. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!